Hey friends, welcome back to the Finding Joy in Your Home podcast. I am your host, Jami Belmay, and I am really excited to talk about today's subject. It's a very different subject than we normally talk about here on the podcast. We're going to be talking about my best work at home tips, or how to start pursuing a passion that you've always wanted to, like writing a book or starting a blog. I guess starting a blog is not on people's radar anymore. Starting an Instagram, whatever that thing is. Well, that's what we're going to chat about today. And then in a little while, you'll hear from our sponsor for today's episode, which is Mosh. Okay, so for those of you who are normally listen over on YouTube, we don't quite have our YouTube set up just yet here in the RV. We actually got the video all set up. The background looks great. We were ready to start doing the video for this podcast again, and we realized that really the only angle, because you have to have a certain amount of distance where your camera is far enough back to be able to see me, you know, all the stuff. The only angle we can get, which I set up and painted and made it look really good, the only angle has this really big window. And we just weren't quite realizing how much was actually, it's not a big window, but we're in an RV, so it feels big. We didn't quite realize how much that glare would be ridiculous. And we don't have our curtains yet for these, or our shades that we're going to be getting for these. So we're not doing the YouTube video for this week, but hopefully in the next week or two, we will have that back up and running for those of you that love to watch over on YouTube. Okay, so today we're talking about my best work at home tips. And this came up because we were chatting about things on Instagram this last week. And I had a few people asking like logistics of when do I get stuff done? I was sharing that we have 5 new book releases that are coming out this summer. I have 3 new releases. Jason has 2. Now that sounds crazy, but these are not all full-length books. I do have my next full-length book called A Christian's Guide to Natural Living. That's my next full-length book, and that is coming out this summer. And I have been working on this book for a very long time. The other 2 books that I'm working on are they're not books. They're like mini guides, or like a pocket guide, like a reference guide, you know, which are way, way, way easier and faster and quicker to work on. And then Jason has 2 theology guides he's working on. Mine are like homemaking how-tos. So anyway, so we announced that we have these 5 new books coming out in our bookstore. You guys can pre-order them right now if you go to findingjoybookstore.com. And I got a few questions in relation to that of how do I find the time to write? How do I find the time to work on this business, to do the things, especially because we have had a tumultuous last couple of months. It's been crazy. So how do I find the time for this? And so I posted on Instagram and said, hey, is this something you guys would like to talk about? And I got a bunch of questions, which I haven't had a chance to address on Instagram yet. Hopefully I can. But most of these questions take way more time than just like a simple little Instagram post. So I thought we would talk about that. How do I, as a mom of almost 8, homeschooling mom, how do I find the time to work on things like writing a book? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, of course, everybody's situations are different, and we'll kind of talk about that. But I do want to give a few caveats before we begin this discussion. So one of the things is what people see us doing here, finding joy in your home. It's my face. It's my name. However, I am not the business. So many people see all the things that we do, the book releases, the podcast, all of these things. And they ask how I do it all. Jami, how do you do all of this? How are you doing all of these things? And really the simple answer is that I do not do all of the things. And there's far more happening with my face on it that looks like I'm the one doing all the things when it's not. So when you are filming a podcast, for example, it takes way more work on the back end than it does for me to sit and record with you guys for 40 minutes. It takes way more time. Twice as much time doing the things on the back end. When I film a course, my time invested in that course is very small compared to all of the back end, all of the editing, there's so much that you never see or hear about because you just take for granted that that video is there and then it's done. So my husband, Jason, most of you guys know this, but my husband, Jason, runs our business full time. So he is the business behind the business. I act more like an assistant than the CEO of our company, which I think is what people kind of struggle with because it's my face, right? You're listening to me on this podcast right now. This is not Jason doing a Jami voice. But Jason has to do all the back end. And so in our week, in our schedule, it is often Jason saying, hey, Jami, I need you to get your podcast done, by Wednesday. And so we'll sit down and I'll say, okay, so what time in your schedule allows that you can take the kids to the park while I film my podcast, or what have you, or you want to run to the grocery store with the little kids so the big kids can stay here and I'll record. That is what it looks like most of the time, is me doing these things so that I can get them submitted to Jason, who can carry out the business. So I think that really is an important distinction. I am not a homeschooling mom of 8 sitting here working 70 hours a week and also somehow homeschooling. And yet I think a lot of people have that perception that I am putting in full days of work every single day. And that is very much not the reality. Another caveat I want to say is that we are progressively looking for ways to take me out of the business as much as humanly possible. In the last 3 or 4 years, every year we have worked on offloading things that do not need to be on me. So yes, I need to be here to write the podcast and share it with you guys. And these are the things that I truly love, getting to do courses, getting to write books. That is what I want to show up. That's what I want to spend my time on. And when I was first starting out, before we even had kids in online business, every single part of it was on me. I did every single thing. I am the one who built our websites originally because I had this crazy dream and I wanted to work on this and I was very passionate. But over the years, we have looked for ways to take me more and more out of the business. So for example, my Jami at findingjoyinyourhome.com email, that is not me. I am not in there. I'd never look at that email. If there is an email that needs an actual response from me, like, hey, Jami, I need your advice on this, Jason will forward it to my private email inbox for my family. I will respond and email it back to Jason and he will email it on. So I do, if you're sending me something personal, I will see it. But if it's customer service, if it's anything like that, it is Jason who is in there. And that has been what's been really, really life-changing, is taking me more and more out of the business in those regards of things that I don't need to be doing. Now, another thing I wanted to say, and I think this is important to address, is that sometimes you have a passion or a hobby that you really want to pursue. So some of you listening are like, I have always dreamed of starting a podcast, whether or not it makes money. Like, I want to start a podcast, or I've always dreamed of writing a book, or I have some great hobby, passion business that I want to do. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's awesome. I think that can benefit your family in great ways. There are other times where you work because you literally have to put food on the table. And there have absolutely been seasons in our life where running a small business is extremely hard. I'm not going to say it's easy, especially in 2024. There are times where you do not want to work and it does not matter. You have to. There have been seasons where I have had to show up and do things when I absolutely did not want to. I wanted to sit on the couch and do nothing, but I had to show up because we have to run this business. And I mean, we have to show up monthly because we can't just not work for 6 months. We would have no money. And so there is absolutely an element, though, that when you are running a business like we are, now that it is our full-time income, we don't have a choice. Like, you have to show up, you have to work. And so what I want to encourage you is that if you are in that situation, if you're thinking, Jami, I'm not trying to pursue a hobby or a passion, we have to be able to pay our mortgage. We have to be able to eat, right? I want to encourage you that you can find joy even in that. Even when you're like bemoaning it and grudging it and you're thinking, I don't want to work, I don't want to do these things. We can find joy in that. We can know that God has us in a particular season for a particular reason. And that is what I have really had to work on. In certain seasons, there were times where I was working more than I wanted to be, but I didn't have a choice. It is what we needed to do and what we needed to get done. And I could either moan and complain about that all day long, or I could say, this is what the Lord has for me today, and I'm going to have joy and peace in that. So that's I think that's something that has aided me well, is that there are times, even with this new book that I'm writing, A Christian's Guide to Natural Living, super passionate about the topic. I have a lot to say, really enjoy writing it. And yet There are so many times in the process where I don't want to work on it. I'd rather go watch a Netflix show or get my book out. I don't want to be diligent and manage my time well, even with a project that I'm very passionate about. And that's something we're going to talk about is a lot of working from home, working on projects like this it really comes down to self-discipline, because there are pockets of time you can find, but you may not want to. You may not want to find that time. All right. Another thing is, I mean, I've already kind of said this, but being a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling mom is my primary duty. So that is my first biggest primary duty. So when work conflicts with that, my home duties normally take precedence. Obviously, there are some times where I just need to, get some work done, or we'll take, a day off school because we need to get some random filming done or what have you. But for the most part, that is my primary duty. And so that's a very clear line that Jason and I do try to maintain. And so he is the one who runs our business full time, and I am assisting in it, if that makes sense. And if Jason wasn't running our business, I would not be doing what I am doing now. If Jason had his own business, or if he worked full-time outside of the home, I would probably have some sort of Instagram I would be doing still, kind of like in the early days before Jason quit his job to come home full-time and run it. But even then I was doing a lot because our goal was to bring him home so that he could run it. But it would split our family's focus and attention too much. I will say that if he was working a different job, a lot of what I do is to support Jason in his calling of running our business. And that's really, really, really important, because I would not be running this if he had his own business or if he was working outside the home. It would take too much for me to do all that we do now. All right. And then my last thing I wanted to say is that I have been working from home on my hobby business, and then now a real business, since 2009. I started my first blog in 2009, very quickly saw that you could make some income from it, which back then, I remember I got a free crock pot. It was like a $30 crock pot. And I mean, that was it. I didn't get paid for anything else. I got a free $30 crock pot. And it was like the coolest thing ever. And I also started getting you could hook up back then with publishers and get free books to review. I didn't get paid anything. I got a free book. And I remember showing my mom and being like, look how cool. And she was like, that's amazing. And we were so excited that I got 5 free books, and then I got a free crock pot. And that was it at the beginning. I was not some people are I started my blog and I started making a full-time income in 3 months. No, that was never been our case. We have worked very hard, very long, very slowly for everything that we've ever had. But throughout that time, since 2009, it has been a long time of building habits. So if you are new to trying to make some money at home, or you're newer to building a business, just know that it doesn't happen overnight, and it does take a lot of habit building. So I have been writing for years and years and years. So I can sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write the next chapter of my book, and I can sit down and I can write it all out. Yeah, I sometimes get writer's block, things like that. But for the most part, I can just sit down and I could blast out 3,000 words in an hour or two, just sitting there. That is not the case 10, 12, 15 years ago. I would have hemmed and hawed and it would have taken me forever, but I've honed my craft and it has taken a long time. So people are like, how can you film a course so quickly? Well, because I can write it quickly. I know the material. I know how to do it. I know how to write a course. And it's different than when you're first starting out. So don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle, because it definitely can have, it has a big impact when you've been doing it a while and you learn kind of where to fit it in to the nooks and crannies. Okay, so that brings me to my actual questions that I had from you guys. So this first one, this is great. Let's talk about this. What's your daily schedule like to allow time for household, family, and also your business? All right, so this is an important one because Jason runs our business full time. Our schedule is very flexible. There are times where he often he chooses to work outside the home whenever he can. So he'll work at Panera. Often, he'll leave at 6 a.m., go to the gym, and then go to Panera, and he'll be gone for most of the day. So in that regard, it's nice because our home schedule is just normal for most days out of the week. I'm home with the kids, cooking, cleaning, homeschooling, doing all that stuff. There are times, though, where Jason will call at noon and say, hey, I just realized I need your podcast done tomorrow, if I come home at 2 today and take the kids to the park, could you film? And I'll go, oh yeah, sure. And we do have a lot of flexibility in that way. And sometimes in the afternoon, I will get a little bit of work stuff done, like an hour or two here or there. I'll jump on. It's very easy for me to jump on and send out a quick newsletter, or I need to, go do this quick thing. I will do that. The older my kids get, the more demanding homeschool gets, the more activities we do, the less and less that I do that, though. I used to do that a lot more when they were all little. It was actually easier to do that when they were all little. The more time that they demand, and the more of them that there are, I do that a whole lot less. So most of my home days at home, I am not thinking about work. I'm not worrying about work. We'll get on Instagram a little bit here and there to post, but often my home days, I actually barely post at all. So when you see me go silent, it's usually because I am home busy working with the kids. Now, once or twice a week, Jason will allow me to not allow me, but give me the space, the time to go. I will go work at Panera, and I will leave at 6 a.m. and I will do 8 hours and just blast out every single thing on my schedule. So I will write podcasts, I will write courses, I will pre-schedule emails, I will do all the things that I need to do. And Jason will take over homeschooling for the day, which he loves, that he gets to be so involved with homeschooling. And he has his homeschool routines. He's got his books he reads with the kids. And that has been such a big blessing in our life, that he has that time to be so directly involved in their education, especially as our boys are getting older. He's able to really have a hand in their education, which I think is very wonderful for boys, especially to have male influence in their schooling, which homeschooling does not always allow. So that's how we kind of break it up, is that I have more chunks of time. So for scheduling, we'll schedule like batch times where I will come in and record 4 to 6 episodes of my podcast all at once. And that's when Jason's like, oh, I'll take the kids to Costco. We'll go to the splash pad. We'll go run some errands. And so he gets to have that time with the kids, which is great. And then it allows me to have more concentrated work time. So the older the kids get, the more my schedule gets full. It works a lot better for me to have a couple hours, a couple chunks of time where I can get stuff done, and then instead of trying to get stuff done like randomly throughout the day. So we made a commitment a long time ago that when I'm homeschooling, when it's especially 8 to 1 p.m. or so during the school week, I am not working on work at all. I am 100% concentrated on homeschooling. And that really helps, because otherwise homeschooling could easily drag out till 5 p.m., trying to get a little work done and then do a little homeschool. So really kind of working on block scheduling has worked really, really well, and allows us to kind of have that the separation of, if I'm working, I'm working. If I'm with the kids, I'm with the kids. And there's times where that will bleed over, but for the most part, that's pretty much the line that we hold. All right. Next question is, how do you get so much done without getting burnt out? I have to be honest here. I think some of this really is personality. I have friends who are much slower processors, who are just move slower, who don't do as many things, but also don't really want to do as many things. And I think God has made all of us so different, with different skills and different abilities. And also God has called us all to different things. And for some reason, I have naturally a lot of energy, but not just energy. I have a lot of passion. I know it's going to surprise you guys, right? I have a lot of passion. There are a lot of things I want to do. There are a lot of things that I get passionate about. And when I get passionate, I make it happen. And so there are times, especially when we were earlier in our business or before Jason was working from home, where on a Friday night, I'd put the kids to bed at, we'd put the kids to bed at 7, and I'd work 7 till midnight, because I was passionate about this project, because I wanted to write a book, because I wanted to do my blog. Even before we had kids, I was working on my blog. And I remember, this was way back. So 2014, we were doing our first conference. Well, no, that wasn't before we had kids. So what am I thinking of? There was some launch thing that I did. I distinctly remember our apartment in Southern California before we had kids. We were working on some launch thing. And so I was redoing something on the website. And this was back when websites were very difficult to use. You had to know HTML. I was changing something and I completely crashed the website. The night before this thing was supposed to launch the next day. And Jason had to get up for work at like 5 a.m. And I remember I stayed up till like 3 a.m. working on trying to get the website back up and running, which I think I did, but it was like a nightmare. I got it all done. I got it all up. I didn't have to do all of that. I didn't have to do whatever this launch was. But I was really, really, really passionate. And I wanted, at that time, I wanted to try to figure out a way that I could bring in a little bit of income once we had kids, because once we had kids, I knew that I was going to be staying home. We would lose my full-time salary. And so I really wanted to figure out some ways that I could make a little bit of money at home. I just was really passionate about that. I really wanted to do that. And so I think for me, yes, I absolutely have times where I don't want to work, where I get burnt out, but I have learned through the process. So for example, we're neck deep in my new book, A Christian's Guide to Natural Living. Through that, there's many times where I have not wanted to sit down and write. I just had to do edits the other day. I'm getting ready this week to start recording the audiobook, which I normally don't mind, but it will be 99 degrees all week here in Texas, super humid. And I have to, where I can record like I am right now so that it is quiet enough, I have to shut the doors, which means there's no air getting in here. And right now, you guys can't see me, but I am sweating. I am so hot. And we are recording this in the morning before it gets too hot. So as I sit down to record I finished Anne of Green Gables. As I sit down to record this new book, it's going to be hot and miserable. And I'm already not looking forward to it. I'm already like, I don't want to do this. But I also know that when I hit stop on that final chapter of that book of recording the audio, I will feel so accomplished. I will feel so happy. Like it will be so worth all of that work. I've done this enough times to know that pushing through that time where you don't want to work on it ends up being often the most fulfilling projects too, and feeling like, oh, I just accomplished something great. And so I can really hold on to those feelings as well and know, okay, I am getting to that point. Now, I think the other thing is, though, with getting so much done without getting burnt out is really, really important to have good routines, good schedules. When I was in my early 20s, I totally could burn the candle at both ends. I could get 5 hours of sleep every single night, and I was completely fine. Some people, their whole life need more sleep. I could totally get away with 5 hours of sleep. I was totally okay. I could just burn the candle at both ends, whatever. I was in my early 20s. You have so much energy back then compared. Now, I can't do that. It would not be sustainable. It would not be good for my family. And so part of not getting burnt out is that I don't push myself to my limits anymore. So we have very good routines in place. And so there are times where I will work in the evenings still. There's times where I just need to get a project done. But for the most part, we do not work in the evenings. We try to hardly ever work in the evenings. My mid-30s brain just can't do it as well as I used to. I'm just more tired, and it's not my, best creative time anymore. And it pushes our bedtime. If I work in the evening, it means we're going to bed way later, which means we're not getting up in the morning. And so for us, being really protective of our routines, Sundays are 100% completely off of work. Unless some crazy emergency came up and a website crashed or something. But other than that, Sundays are 100% off of work. That is our Sabbath. Saturday mornings, we'll usually get some work done, but usually we're, and then by Saturday evenings, we're doing all stuff with family. And so the work, we really try, even though running a small business means you could literally work at every single moment of every single day, we really do try to stick to a normal schedule of Monday through Friday working. And that has been actually extremely life-giving to us. And so Jason and we make a very concerted effort that we have plenty of downtime, that we have plenty of rest, that we have plenty of family time. It is never worth it for us to grow our business at the sake of our family. And, we've talked many times that if we had decided to maybe only have 2 kids and put them in school, where would our business be? Oh my gosh, our business would be millionaires by now. Where our business could be. And yet that is not our priority. That it would never, ever in a million years be worth it for us. And so we have to very much remember that too, is that building in rest, it does take sacrifice too. And it means that we do go at a slower pace. It means that we can't always get stuff out as fast. And yet our family is number one. absolute number one priority. And so there are times when we're under a huge deadline where, especially when we've got like a big conference coming up, there's often times where Jason will be working every single night, way late into the evening. And that's okay. We do those short seasons, we do those short bursts, and then we make sure to really get back on normal routines and schedules, which really works, helps a lot with the burnout, and then also just kind of keeping everything in perspective as well. Okay, this next question, daily schedule rhythm for work and home management, especially when you have a new baby. All right, so I'm getting up to this. We've got 6 weeks or so left until our new baby's here. And I am planning a 4-week maternity leave where I will be completely off of everything. There's always times where Jason's like, hey, I got this email from someone. I need you to address it. You know, little things. I can jump on the computer for 5 minutes, but I will be pre-recording all of my podcasts. We will be pre-recording like any projects that we have coming out. Jason will be the one absolutely heading those up, leading them. We will have emails pre-written. So I will have 4 weeks completely off. Jason will be working, obviously, that whole time, and he'll be working like every single day. But I will take those 4 weeks off. And then we are planning a 2-week transition period where I will start to step back into things lightly. And then after that, I'll probably be back to kind of my normal routines, which is great for me. By 6 weeks, that is perfect. And so with having a new baby, like really my focus, especially the first 2 weeks, is I'm not doing anything whatsoever. And so, I mean, I don't know. I think the first few weeks of a baby's life, we don't have normal routines. We don't have normal schedules or rhythms. We won't be doing normal school. We just kind of are all hands on deck, enjoying the new baby, napping when we need to, watching a movie when we need to. And yeah, that's what it's going to be. Okay. Someone said hours you get in during the week and how to manage your time well. Someone else said time management strategies, please. Okay. So I really think the key to this is getting really solid routines and schedules in place. This has been in the last 3 years. I think Jason and I have moved more and more towards this better than we ever have in our entire lives. A big part of that is our life has also just been crazy, like with having 5 kids in 4 years. I mean, we went from a family of just Jason and I to 4 children in 2 years. It was wild. Like I even look back and I'm like, how? Like it was wild. We were hanging on for dear life. We did not have normal routines and schedules, and we couldn't. Like God got us through that season. So if you're in a season of just like insanity, just know that like God is faithful to help you through that. But as you come out of that, I think it is really important to establish good routines, good schedules. And so I know for a lot of people, for example, with homeschooling, they love the extreme flexibility, which we do too. We love that we can just take off a random day and change up our schedule and do stuff. I am not, I've said this before, I am not a type A personality. I am not naturally organized with my time. I am a creative. I am like, I will flit and follow butterflies and go say, you know what, kids, let's take off today and go to the lake. That is my personality. And that has served us well. Also, like, I'm very thankful God creates all of us with unique abilities. I don't think that that is a bad personality to have, even though a lot of times the perfectionist personality gets praised more. But I have had to learn how to be more type A. And I think this goes both ways. If you are a hyper type A, you're super scheduled, you're super regimented. God has given you some really incredible blessings in that, but you might need to learn how to loosen up and go with the flow a little bit more sometimes. You might need to realize you can throw the schedule out sometimes and go to the lake. So either side you fall on, I know some of you are just naturally more balanced, which I love, but well, I've become that way more. I have become more balanced. So often when people look at our schedules, our routines, they're like, oh, everybody, oh, you're type A. I'm not actually at all, but I have learned how to be more scheduled, more regimented. So with homeschooling, what I was saying, a lot of people love that, oh, we just get up whenever we all get up. We don't start school till 10 a.m. and we just kind of, go with the flow. And I mean, I think that's fine. That's great. If that works well for your family, praise God for that. And when our kids were younger, that is definitely more so how we functioned because we just kind of needed to out of necessity. Now, so as our kids are getting older, we have huge academic plans. We have things that we love and enjoy doing. There's always more subjects we'd love to fit in. We are way more scheduled and regimented. So Jason and I are up. I'm pregnant right now, so my schedule is like, if I didn't get good sleep, I'm sleeping in. I'm not getting up at 6. And I really haven't been up at 6 this whole pregnancy. I'm more like up at 7. Jason's up at 6. And we get our Bible reading done in the morning. It's another big important part of balance. I will do my Bible reading and prayer time first thing in the morning. And then if I have time, I'll read a chapter of my current nonfiction book while I drink my coffee, sit out in the sunlight without my contacts in or without glasses to kind of soak in that good morning light, which really helps with sleep and your circadian rhythm, which we can talk about another time. And I ease into my morning, and then kids are starting to wake up. Whoever wakes up, they just grab they know they have daily assigned readings every day and their math that they start online. So often by the time I come back in, there's a kid on the computer doing math. There's a kid on the couch reading. A couple of kids might still be asleep. It's just kind of whatever before 8 a.m. But by 8 a.m., everybody's up eating breakfast, and then we start school for the day. And if we ever get behind on that schedule, it really does make things more difficult because then it bleeds more into the afternoon. Stuff just kind of gets off, and yet we have goals and routines and things that we want to get to. And it just makes our afternoons more sweet. It makes downtime for the kids better. And so we have really gotten so much more regimented with our times and with our schedules. And being a work at home homeschooling family gives us extreme flexibility, and that's not always a good thing. Having more time on your hands actually means you get less done sometimes. Having extreme flexibility means it's very, very, very easy for tasks to take up an infinite amount of time when maybe that task should only take an hour. And so I have really learned when you sit down on the computer and I have a task, I'm not opening Instagram. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not checking my email. I have assigned times when I go in and check my email and return them all. Otherwise, if I'm sitting down because I need to send my newsletter out, I sit down, write my newsletter, send it out within 20 minutes. If I'm working on a chapter, everything else is closed. I'm working on that chapter. But same thing with my house. If it's time to be home, I'm working on organizing and cleaning and homeschooling. And in the afternoon, I will often have several projects of like, I need to get some, we're going to make a few things of food. We're going to, do X, Y, or Z. And that really works very, very, very well for us. But it has been a lot of trial and error of trying to figure out the best ways to manage our time. And also it comes back to what are our highest priorities. So at this point, we don't do sports. We don't really have plans to do a lot of sports. We prefer doing things as a whole family. And obviously now we're traveling, so we are not in the same area all the time for doing sports. But there's certain things that as a family you have to pick and choose priorities and then be okay with those priorities. Know that you can't do everything in the world. And so whatever those priorities are, need to be put on the schedule, and sometimes they're in the place of other things. So right now, I don't have tons of time for going to like play dates. And I did more so when the kids were little. And I think that's kind of the natural order of things. Most of my homeschool friends who have older kids, they don't have time for play dates during the week because schooling is such an important thing. Schooling is a full-time job. And so I don't do play dates all the time during the middle of the week because even though they're fun and they're life-giving and sometimes they fit in for the week and we'll go do it, but it's not the highest priority. We have other things that take a higher priority that are more important. And I am okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. There will be time again in my future for more play dates and more time to go do things like that. But that's not the season I'm in right now. And homeschooling takes an incredible amount of time and effort and energy. And yet, Jason and I absolutely 100% know that it is worth it and that it is what God has called us to. So because of that, other things have to take a back seat. And being okay with what is on your priority list, whether you've chosen it or not, it goes a long way. So figure out what those huge priorities are and then how you are going to find the time for those and what things you need to say yes to, what things you need to say no to. Okay, last question is someone was asking my favorite business books. So I don't know any modern business books. I have not read any new business books coming out in quite a while because I find they all just repeat themselves. So there are great ones out there. But these are the ones that have really made, I'm going to date myself if any of you guys know these. These are all older ones, but these are ones that have had a big impact on me. I will ask Jason to put this list in the show notes for you. Okay. So that's one of the things Jason does. So I sit and write, and then he does all the rest, which takes forever. So as soon as I'm done recording, I do not touch this podcast again. I am done, and Jason does the rest, which is wonderful. Okay, favorite business books. Superfans by Pat Flynn and Will It Fly by Pat Flynn. Excellent books. Living Forward by Michael Hyatt and Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt. Now, both of those are not necessarily strictly business books. He is writing, I think, generally to people running businesses, but they're more like life planning. Living Forward is all about how do you construct a life plan for yourself. And then Your Best Year Ever is how to accomplish like your 5 big goals this next year. And I think more than any other business related book, the books along these lines are what have helped me the absolute most. So there's great podcasts out there that will teach you all kinds of business stuff. There's great resources, but if you don't know where you want your life to be in 20 years from now, in 30 years from now, if you don't know how to accomplish your big goal for this next year, none of that business training is going to matter because you don't know how to put it into action. And so Living Forward, for example, this idea has had huge impacts on us, not necessarily even just from this book, but Jason and I are incredibly passionate about building this multi-generational business. We already have sons who, one of my sons, he every single day is working on taking drawing and sketching and artist classes because he is determined that he wants to learn how to make the illustrations for our books that we publish. He's like, Mom, I'm going to take over. I'm going to do Sterling Spectacles. Like, I'm going to do all the illustration. He wants to make a board game, which I told him if you could illustrate the board game yourself, it would be incredible. And so he's got these plans. Now, they may not pan out. He's young. He may not end up doing that. But if he does, we are going to have a business all set up for him to help him launch his own, right? And so we have huge, huge plans of wanting to pass this business down one day, of getting our kids involved. And that's a huge motivator, is that it is really tough raising 8 children while we're in the thick of it, homeschooling and running a business. For me, it would be 1,000 times easier if Jason just worked a regular job and he was out of the house and went and did his job. But that's not what God has called us to. And we are so thankful for this business. And there's so many great blessings, but it is tough to run your own business. We are not at that point yet where we have a team of 30 people and we can just like hand off tasks. Maybe one day. But really having that goal, that end goal in mind of why are you doing this makes a huge difference. So that was my big motivator for me, is I did have a couple of little children when I was working my booty off on this online business because we were trying to get the income to a place where Jason could quit his job. He was working in corporate sales. If you know anything about corporate sales, it is cutthroat. It is ruthless. If you have one bad quarter, you're out. By God's grace, he always met his quota. He did, year after year. And it quickly became apparent, though, with the changes in the company, it became a publicly traded company, which with that just makes it so much more cutthroat. It used to be like a family-owned business. We got to the point where we realized in the next 2 years, Jason was not going to be able to stay at this company because the other salesmen who were successful were divorced. They had no kids, and they were working 7 days a week. They'd be in the office Saturdays and Sundays. They were putting in 90 hours a week. And they were just working all the time. And you know what? They were making a lot of money with commission-based sales like that. And yet that is 100% nothing that we wanted Jason to do. And so as he started feeling more and more called to run our business, he was working a ton. He was providing for our family, and we knew in the long run, this was not going to be sustainable. And so I really ramped up my efforts. I worked way more in that time to be able to have a business that Jason could help in the evenings and the weekends, but his time was super limited. And we put in a lot. That last year, we made a goal in January and said by the end of this year, we want Jason to be able to quit. I was pregnant with our second set of twins at the time. And in December, by God's grace alone, not us, by God, Jason quit his job that December. So it did take that full year, but we worked every second of that year in the nooks and crannies to make that happen. And the payoff was worth it. Like, it was what God was calling us to do. There are times where we work hard because God's calling us to that. And we did that because we had that vision of what we wanted for our family and for our business and for our life. And something like Living Forward or Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt, both of those are really helpful in that regard. Okay. Next book is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a great book for building good habits that stack, that are helpful. Crushing It by Gary Vaynerchuk, and then also Jab, 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 Right Hook by Gary Vaynerchuk. Those are both old books, but they are good. And then my next three are really great recommendations. These are books by Russel Brunson. Now, I will give you a caveat. Russel Brunson runs the website ClickFunnels. We used ClickFunnels for several years. They're wonderful and incredible for making funnels, for, putting out a lead page and a free offer and having someone sign up and then becoming a customer, blah, 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 all that stuff. But back when we were first reading these books, ClickFunnels was the only one doing this. It was the only tool. And we used it for several years until it became so ridiculously expensive. We ended up switching. But I just want to say there are so many online tools that will help you do these things now that you don't have to have ClickFunnels. So ClickFunnels is still great. But if you read through these three books I'm going to recommend, just know there are a myriad of other ways you can play out his ideas. So his books are Expert Secrets, Traffic Secrets, and .com secrets. And those are these are boots on the ground. How do you build an online business? How do you connect with your audience? How do you figure out your audience? They are fabulous. So all three of those by Russel Brunson are super good. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave you guys at today. I did talk a long time about this stuff. Hopefully it was helpful. I always find it hard to talk about business because I feel like it's so subjective to everybody's unique situations and their business and the things that they do. So I always feel like I'm completely unqualified to talk on this subject at all. So hopefully it was interesting to listen to. Thanks for sticking with me. We are getting the next 4 weeks planned out. I will be recording my next 4 podcasts. And then after that, I will be recording my maternity leave podcasts, which feels crazy that is so soon. So we've got some really fun podcasts coming up for you. Thank you guys so much for listening in. And then don't forget to check out our sponsor for today's episode. We have moshlife.com/home. You can get 20% off plus free shipping on their bestsellers trial pack or their plant-based trial pack. You can get amazing tasting protein bars that are just loaded with all kinds of healthy stuff for you. Just go to moshlife.com/home. All right, ladies. Well, thank you so much for tuning in with me today. We'll see you guys back here next week for the next episode.